Good afternoon. Happy to be part of Global Azure Virtual Bootcamp. My name is Martina Grom. I'm an Office 365 MVP, which will soon be renamed to kind of Microsoft 365 MVP. I'm also a Microsoft Regional Director. I'm the co-founder of At Work Information Technology. We are located in Vienna, Austria. Some of you know my colleague, Tony Pohl, who has his session today at 9 a.m. And what I do from my history here is I started with Microsoft Cloud Services back in 2008. And I'm working a lot towards Microsoft 365, Office 365, but also very often I work with customers around governance and security within Microsoft Azure. And when I was asked for presenting something for the Global Azure Bootcamp, and I wanted to submit something which is the best of both worlds, I chose identity governance because what I learned in the past is that without Azure Active Directory, Microsoft 365 wouldn't work. So it's kind of the brain of Microsoft 365 and Office 365. So everything goes with and without identities. And identity governance is also something which is very special because it's independent if you are a developer or an IT pro or just a user who wants to use different apps within his Microsoft 365 environment. And this is why I wanted to talk about identity governance for Microsoft Azure and also for Microsoft 365. So first of all, thanks to the Platinum sponsor, Microsoft, because it's very important, especially in those times where we don't see each other in person. And I really regret not being in Linz because Rainer Stolpeck does an awesome on-site event every single year. But it's also very important that we stay together now, also in the community, that we have opportunities like that, where we can present our content, share content with others, go through Q&A, support and help others. So don't stop speaking to each other, don't stop asking. And also think about being supportive also for our sponsors around the whole Global Azure Bootcamp. Like you see here, there are a lot of companies which are currently supporting those kind of events, and I'm incredibly proud that we can be part of that every year because it's really important to have that here. So also, what I want to highlight is there's a European Cloud Conference in November where you can also see different speakers around that and different tutorials. I do not actually know because they rescheduled it from, I think, July to November. I do not really know if it will be an on-site event or it will be an online event as well. But look there because you have virtual tutorials, everything for free from incredible speakers like Magnus and Aidan Finn and Mustafa, and also from Paul Swada. So also, if you have more questions or if you want to stay in contact with us, join us on Discord and chat and discuss about selected topics around that, and also go into the Azure Heroes channel and connect with other people which are interested in Azure and everything which comes around. So what I wanted to start off, and I do that a lot, and this is why identity governance is one of the most important things, is throughout 2020, 95% of cloud security failures will be the customer's fault. And it sounds really bad if you think about that. And it's not a failure, it's probably a problem. The customer hasn't thought about that. And what I see when I work with my customers is that some of the scenarios we work on, it's kind of, you need to have a secure environment, but very often if you come out of the IT pro space, you are always securing your perimeter network. So you have a lot of firewalls, you have a lot of endpoint protection, you have a SOC center in place, everything, you can manage your clients and everything else, but you haven't thought about how to secure your identities. And especially now in times like COVID, where people work at home, they connect through the internet to corporate resources and so on, people are probably not protected. And on the other side, I see that users still trust their IT system, that they say, okay, you need to take care about, are we secure or not secure? And please give me a secure environment where I can work with. Another interesting point, I can't say that enough, and people who already talked with me or heard former talks about me, is please enable MFA on all your accounts which you like and which you want not to be hacked, because the most popular hacking technology is still leaked credentials. And the reason for that is people use the same password throughout different services. They do not like MFA because it puts additional burden on them. They need to use an app, they need to use SMS or a call and so on. But if you enable MFA on your identity accounts, you reduce the risk of leaked credentials to less than 2%. And this is also something you have to consider if you go into a governance discussion. The very first thing I do with my customers is I talk with them and say, okay, we can't go without enabling MFA for all of your users, not only their administrators. It's fine if you have it on for your administrators, but also consider the same thing for your users as well. So going forward, what is Azure Active Directory, and what we do here is, and this is what Microsoft has there, and believe me, it's getting more and more. So you have millions of active users, you have a lot of daily requests, and you also see the authentication requests are 30 billion per day. So it's always also very important to understand that Azure Active Directory scales as Azure scales, and also in times like that today, where a lot of people sign into Microsoft Teams, try new services and so on. It's always the same situation. You need to have a scalable service, and Azure Active Directory helps you to get connected to the services you need and so on. And also what you see here is there's always a discussion, and probably you Azure guys do not see it because it's more a pay-as-you-go service. But on the Microsoft 365 side, it's very often a discussion. I have Office 365 licenses. Why should I pay for a premium account in Azure Active Directory? And this is one of the topics I will tell you today and show you today, because it's really a very good service from a security perspective, that you have a good governance on that and see that. Also from the business results, what we see here is those Azure Active Directory premium seats are used on a daily basis. And this is also what I see with my customers. So every customer who has Azure Active Directory in place uses that on a daily basis. And there are advantages like license assignments, sign-in risks, premium access to security features, identity governance, and so on. So you have a lot of opportunities here to secure your identities. And also, when we look at the reliability of Azure Active Directory, we see it's a very mission critical service. And believe me, the Azure AD team is pretty aware of that, because if it's not working, you can't sign in and you're probably locked out of your business critical service. So it means it needs to be here, not only 99.9%, it also needs to be available throughout the day, throughout the night, 24/7, and every single small impact impacts 1 million users, as you see here in the statistics. So it's pretty important that you have that on. And also because I talked about MFA, and probably some of you guys thought by themselves, yes, but MFA last year, it didn't work for one day and so on. I'm pretty aware. It's probably not perfect on all times, but there is a very good guidance from Microsoft here, where they say, okay, if you have problems with your MFA account, you just need to have a Glassbreak account which hasn't MFA enabled, so you can sign in the unlikely case that MFA is not working for your users, so you can disable those policies and so on. So we have a lot of different approaches here where we see how we can do that. If we look at the hyperscale scenario, we also see how much CPU cores it needs to deliver a service for 30 billion daily authentications. And also what we see here is Azure Active Directory is a worldwide, it's a global service, it's deployed in every single Azure region. So we have it available as a worldwide service, and it spans throughout the globe. There are some exceptions for that. So for instance, the governmental cloud in the United States has its own Azure Active Directory, as well as in China, where there is an own Azure Active Directory, and the former now deprecated German cloud also had its own Azure Active Directory deployed. But currently it's a worldwide service, so every single service who connects there, you can sign in from everywhere. You do not go if you're, for instance, your Microsoft 365 tenant is located in Europe, and you are currently in the US or somewhere in Asia, you do not need to connect to the European data center. You connect to the next connection point within Azure Active Directory, and then you use the Microsoft global network to connect to your resources wherever they are. So if we talk a little bit about security and compliance and how the policy engine and also the governance around that looks like, we have here the scenario that Azure Active Directory gives users different settings. So a user can connect through Azure Active Directory. You see from a user in which groups he belongs to, which roles he has. We have also Azure Active Directory RBAC access, so every user can have selected roles here. You can see the location. So for instance, from a security and compliance perspective, you can also restrict user access if they are in a risky location or not in a network you are trusting there. You can give them different privileges depending on their user role. And you can also evaluate the risks around sign-in policies and user risks. On the other side, what we have here, we have, from a security perspective, we have endpoint protection as well. Don't get me wrong, it's still very important to have endpoint protection, and this is towards the devices. So you can go with Microsoft Defender ATP, which gives you advanced threat protection on your devices, not only on Windows devices, it's also protected your Mac devices, so you can use them. And also we have Microsoft Intune, and Microsoft Intune is a device management service where you can manage your mobile devices, your tablets, your PCs, and so on. And the reason for that is we are always in a risk evaluation state, so we need to know, is my device at risk? Is my content at risk? Is my app at risk? Or is my identity at risk? And this is kind of a combination of all of those scenarios where you see you can go through that policy engine and can put additional security topics on that. One of them is Microsoft Cloud App Security. I love that because Microsoft Cloud App Security gives you insights about all the applications which are used within your organization. And you see kind of what shadow IT do I have in place? Or what are my users using? Are they heavily using other cloud services? And why are they using them? And out of a security and risk compliance policy, you can evaluate those cloud applications, and you can also sanction or not sanction them. Then we have one other topic, which is around Microsoft information protection. This is content protection, and that means we have endpoint protection on the devices, on the clients. We have an identity protection, and we also have information protection. And information protection means you have data classification, which is based on documents, on a SharePoint site, on a Microsoft team, on anything else where you can put in additional classification on the content. And that means it helps you in secure your content and your environment as well. And when you see here, when we go a little bit more to the right, we see here Azure Active Directory and all those policies is not only protecting the cloud services, it's also protecting cloud services, SaaS apps, and also it's going towards a protection of your on-premises and web application scenarios. So you can do a lot of them together in here and look at that. So when we first talk about governance and identity and risk protection, what we see here, one of the most fundamental ones is Azure Active Directory Conditional Access. And how does it work? A conditional access policy works on a user level. That means a user signs into Azure Active Directory, and he gets an information and a policy set which evaluates the user and session risk. It makes a real-time evaluation. Where is the user located? Is it a risky sign-in? Does he want to connect to a high secure application like in the backend? He wants to connect to SAP or to your financial service or anything else, and then applies that policy to you. And you see the controls we have here is, consider the user sits in a, the user is in an internet cafe on a Windows XP machine. He tries to sign into the corporate network, and it runs through the policies. And because he's in an unsecure environment on a non-compliant device in a risk IP address range or anything else which makes the conditional access policy believe that the user is in a higher risk scenario, it can allow or block the access to the service. Or another scenario could be that you limit access to the services. So for instance, to give you a practical example, my customers currently during COVID-19, when everybody works from home, some people or some organizations did set up conditional access policies where they say, I allow you to connect to our organization with a corporate-owned compliant device, but I do not allow you on your private machine to have the same controls and connection to your environment. So those are the differences between that. And also what could happen here, a conditional access policy can set up that way that you say, okay, I'm not sure where Martina is. It looks like she's in a risky environment. So I will put another security requirement in there. I will require her to authenticate through MFA again, so that we have clear that the second factor is with her and that we can see that. The beauty around those settings is you can, they are fully audited. You see what happens here. You also see if someone has leaked credentials and so on. And you also have one of the pain points here at the end is around legacy authentication. So what I talk a lot about is modern authentication versus legacy authentication. Legacy authentication means username and password, which are stored where you have an authentication password or anything else. But the main topic around that is legacy authentication is used if you use POP3, IMAP, EWS, or any other services where you just need a username and a password to do certain things in the environment. So the main target out of a security perspective should be to reduce the amount of apps who sign into your environment with legacy authentication, because it's an additional risk from a security perspective, which needs to be covered here. As I spoke around that, those sign-ins are also audited. So you can see Martina signed in from a remote location, And you will see that in the audit log, which also gives you an impression what happens here. Again, a practical example from one of my customers. We see here they are really fighting against leaked credentials, and we see a lot of sign-in scenarios which come out of China or Philippines or Russia or wherever in the world, where you see, okay, people are constantly looking at leaked credentials where they can work into your environment. Practical example, last year we just looked at how a hacker tried to sign in into an Azure service, and he tried for 4 hours with a leaked credential password list, and after 4 hours he got into the system. So also from a hacking perspective, please consider those people know their stuff. They also know how to do that, and they have time. 4 hours is nothing if they get insights into an organization and do something really bad within the organization. If we go into identity protection, and this is what I will also show you in the demo, we have here a lot of new APIs and a lot of new views here. And the good part here is you can see what are my high-risk users, how many legacy apps do I still have in my tenant, and so on. So it gives you a really nice overview about the identity protection state, and you can see what you do. And based on that, you can also set the policies in Azure Active Directory. From a developer platform perspective, I guess there are some developers in the audience as well. It's also very important that you can authenticate. So if you're building an app, you have not to build your own identity system. Just don't do that. I'm very long in the industry, and in the beginning, every single developer always built his own identity system. There was a table with usernames and passwords, and the passwords were probably encrypted or not encrypted. And it was kind of a very new world around identity protection. So the disadvantage of that is if you build your own identity system, you are always at risk to lose the users, the credentials, and so on. And that means out of GDPR, you have to confirm that you had a data leakage and so on. And also out of convenience, you always should use an identity system which is in common use. So take away that burden, let Microsoft do that, or take any other identity system, but please, please don't build your own. It's not worth it. It costs you a lot of time, and it's simply not worth it anymore. And the nice thing around that, you can connect through Azure to Azure AD from any application you're building, depending on it's a .NET application. If you're building JavaScript or whatever, you can connect your app that it uses Azure Active Directory authentication. And also, if we go more in the commercial space, you also see with the identity platform, you can open your application to a lot of users which are currently using Azure Active Directory. So just to give you another overview, you see Azure Active Directory can be your single point of identity platform, which connects to every single app in your organization. And you see, Azure Active Directory works with a lot of standards. So you have OpenID, you have SCIM, you have SAML. It also supports legacy application. You can have an app proxy installed, which gives you access to your on-premises applications if you have them. There are migration tools in there and so on. So you have a lot of implementation scenarios here. And also what you see here, there's an app gallery in place where you see there are a lot of certified apps. And just to name a few of them, because you see very popular ones like SAP and so on, but you can also use enterprise applications. Like, for instance, you have a marketing department which is responsible for Twitter and Facebook and so on. You can also connect that to Azure Active Directory, that the sign-in scenario is a common one. And from the third party application, we see here, or Microsoft sees here, there are 2 million active apps which are currently connecting to there, and you also see very popular ones like ServiceNow, which is a ticket system, and also Google Apps are connecting through Azure Active Directory as a third-party service, and you see how you can do that and how it looks like. And then we have the identity governance part. I talked a lot about how to secure your identities, but there is a lot of other governance in place which you can use on Azure Active Directory. And one of them is entitlement management. And entitlement management gives you kind of a self-service solution where you can delegate your access management to selected groups and give them access to applications, teams, groups, SharePoint site, or whatever you want within your organization for a given period of time, with the security in place and with a good governance in place, because we have it audited as well. So I'm now switching to my demo, and I'm going into Azure Active Directory to just show you how that looks like. I've here my Azure Active Directory already in place, and I'm just going first into Azure Active Directory, and I hope you can see my screen already. What we have here on the left is we have our users and groups, and also organizational relationships, which means these are my organizational relationships where I can say, okay, I'm working with Fabricam a lot or with other guests very often, so I can fill in an organizational relationship, which gives me a little bit more freedom. If I have another organization I work on a daily basis, I can just set up kind of an org relationship. And on the other point, because I simply showed that to you, is here I have the security settings, and the security settings give you access to the conditional access policies, as I already mentioned here. And here you see you have baseline policies in place because Microsoft wants you to stay secure with all the services. Or you can also set up your new policies, and also you have a what-if scenario. So if we look for that, and I give you just an impression, if I set up a new conditional access policy, and I said, okay, it's a Microsoft 365 policy, then I select the users. So one of the things you can go here that you see, okay, all of my users or only selected users and groups have that in place. And here you can say, okay, I'm opening up an conditional access policy for all my guests, because I want to have my internal users using MFA as well as my external users using that. And then you can check what cloud apps you want here. And the beauty here is you can say, okay, I want that for all my cloud apps. And that means every single cloud app which is authenticated through Azure Active Directory is connected through the conditional access policy. Or you can say, okay, I only need that for a subset of my cloud applications. And here you can see I have Office 365 added here, but I also have an Enterprise Box account, or I have some of the applications Tony did in the morning with the Global Azure Bootcamp, and so you can select it on your terms, how you want to add that conditional access policy to them. So I'm now selected that, and also one of the important things is you can always exclude certain apps if you want that, or certain users and so on. So we have set that up, and then we go to the conditions, and that means you can configure it depending on the sign-in risk. As I already mentioned, Martina is in an internet cafe in Thailand on a Windows XP machine. So the machine learning scenario behind Azure might consider that as a high risk scenario. So you can see, okay, this is my sign-in risk. And also you can go into the locations or into device platforms. So for instance, I can say, okay, I want to include any device here. And you see here we have Windows, Mac OS, iOS, and Android. And also one of the things is you can go into client applications, so you can do it for mobile apps, but not for browser settings, for instance. And you can also go into the device state. So you have various options here to set that up. And then we go into the access control, and access control just means I want to require MFA. I want to have my device to mark as compliant and select that. And that also means if I go back here, you see here, I require all of the selected controls, or I require one of the selected controls. The big difference is here, consider you are on a non-compliant device, then you will be asked for MFA. And if MFA is okay, you can sign in. If you have both as a requirement, it just means both needs to be a fit here. And you can also look at the session frequency you have here, and then you can also enable the policy in 3 stages. You can once say, okay, I enable the policy for all of my guests because I do not care. My guests need to enable MFA for the cloud applications, or you go into report only just to watch and learn what happens with the applications, or you can also turn it off. And then you have created that conditional access policy, it's validated and it's created here. Also, a good recommendation would be if you start with a security default in the beginning, if you do not see the baseline policies here, just giving you a pro tip, you can also go in the security default and look here for security defaults in your tenant. So what else do we have here? We have also identity protection in place, and identity protection in place means you can set up, for instance, a registration policy, MFA registration policy for all of your users, despite of a conditional access policy. And that means MFA needs to be enabled, and every single user needs to do that, and I can enforce that. Or you can also evaluate here your risky sign-ins, where you can see, okay, those were the users who signed into the tenant, and you can also see and learn what happens here from those user policies. So this is a short overview what you can do from a security perspective. The next thing I wanted to show here is the enterprise application stack, because out of the governance, very often I learn with my customers, they're missing out on that point. So they are securing their endpoints, their identities, their information, but they do not care about enterprise applications which connect to Azure Active Directory. And then when we do a security review and we open up the enterprise application plate, it's kind of an surprise for many CISOs and security officers when they say, okay, we are using Box, interesting. And there's a BMW app for cars connected to my Azure Active Directory. How can that happen? And Alexa has access to, as well as my Garmin watch. So those are the enterprise applications you see here, and where you need to put the governance in place. And the good governance for enterprise applications might be that to say, okay, those are the enterprise apps. So many users are connected to those enterprise apps, and probably some of them are not in use at all. So you can safely remove those enterprise apps. So it kind of belongs how strict your Active Directory is set up, if you're allowed to do that or not. But the last point I wanted to show you here is if we go back here, and if you just look for identity governance, and we go into that blade, what we see here is we have currently 4 different availabilities in the identity governance place. So the first of all is terms of use. And terms of use can be applied to every single login into your tenant in Azure Active Directory out of a security and compliance status. This might be very important for your data security. officers that they say, okay, every external person who connects into the Contoso tenant needs to agree to the terms of use of Contoso first before he gets access to that. What's the reason behind that? It's GDPR, it's IP protection, and so on. So there could be different use cases why you use that terms of use status. And then you have one thing which is quite interested is privileged identity management. And what does privileged identity management show you? Privileged identity management gives you access, elevated rights to Azure Active Directory for a certain amount of time and for a selected role. So that means, for instance, a general recommendation by Microsoft is reduce the amount of global administrators in Microsoft 365 to less than 5 global administrators. So what you can do in theory is that you implement privileged identity management and you say, I have one global administrator in a permanent role, and every single other person who needs administrative access has a global reader role and needs to promote himself to a global administrator or to an exchange administrator here in there. And if we look at that, you have here your rows, and if you have it enabled here, you can just activate the privileged right. What is the benefit about using privileged identity management is you get access to Azure Active Directory for 1 hour, for 2 hours, for 4 hours. It's fully audited. The rights are elevated, so you have extended privileged for 1 or 2 hours, and after that you get depromoted to a single user again. And so you are working on a minimum risk scenario with a tenant. And also what you can do here, you can build in a workflow where you can say, okay, Tony is a global administrator, but I need to approve that for him. So this is also something which is really important. And if we look here at the certain roles we have here is, we can first look at the eligibility, and you see Azure Active Directory provides a lot of roles in your tenant. So what you can see, you have a lot of security reader roles, operator, and so on, because Azure Active Directory works on RBAC, and a role-based access model means giving people access, but only for a certain amount of time and only the privileges they really need. So there's normally no need that you have 30 global admins in your environment. And then we have another topic which is called access reviews, and access review is also something which is quite interesting and also quite important, is what you can do here with a review means you have an access review for a group which is called marketing runners, where you want the owner of the group to review the external guests if they are still necessary in the tenant. Because in practice, what happens, you are inviting guests from all over the world into your tenant, and those guests have access forever. And what you can do out of a governance perspective, you can say, okay, Martina is the owner of the runners group, and she's responsible for the guests who have access to our corporate resources. So you can create an access review, and you can see this access review needs to be done monthly, weekly, whatever, depending on the risk of the policy. And you can say, okay, it's going to the members of the group only for guest users. And here you can select the group you need the access review on here. You can say, okay, I want to review the executive group because it's kind of a risk if there are external guests which have access here. And you can say, okay, who is the reviewers? It's the group owner. And that means the group owner gets a notification, okay, please do an access review for that group as well. And also what you can do here is get some recommendations for the access review, a reason for that approval, and so on. So you can do that and do an access review very easily. just going back to give you the current overview about access reviews, you see here we currently didn't have any access reviews, but if we had some, you will see them here and you can also audit them. And the last thing around identity governance, what I wanted to show you is entitlement management. And entitlement management gives you a lot of rights, what you can do here. So entitlement management means you give access packages to other users which can sign into your tenant and be part of selected groups or anything else. So how does it look like? I'm creating a new access package and it's called marketing runners. And you see also you can add that to a certain catalog. And then in the next portion, you can add those groups and teams you want persons who have access to that access package be part of. So I said, okay, I need the Mark project team. And I also want the marketing teams. So you can add those resources. And after that, you select the role the person gets in there. And you can say, okay, everyone who has access to that group gets the member role in that group. But you can also add selected applications. And what we see here on the right is we see all our enterprise applications. And that means I can connect to Box because we need Box as an enterprise account. And also here, you get different user roles. So for instance, if you have connected your Salesforce environment, you can also select that as an application. And on the third part, you can add some SharePoint sites as well if you want that. And then the last point you have here in the entitlement management blade is you are now deciding where do you want your users have that access package. So you can say, okay, I want that for users in my directory. I want that only for guests, or I want a direct assignment. So first of all, I go into for users in my directory. Here I can select all members, excluding guests, all including guests, or specific users and groups. So I can say here, okay, who will have access to that, and it will for sure be Adele and also Christy, who gets access to that package. And then you have the option that you say, okay, I need an approval. That means if Adele wants to have access to that package, it will go through an approval process, or you go into a self-service approval, and then you can enable that. And the next part is what is the life cycle of that package? And this is quite important because you say, okay, Adele is working on that project, but only for the next 90 days. And that means after 90 days, she would lose access to that entitlement management package automatically. And if she's an external guest, she will be also removed out of your Azure Active Directory automatically. So that brings a lot of benefit to clean up your Azure Active Directory and also give people only access to those applications they really need. We do not need an access review. And we see here, okay, we get an overview about that. And if I haven't forgotten anything, yeah, I have. Let me check. Running in Vienna. So let me check if I have any additional errors. No, try again. And then you see the access package is created. And what happens here, you get an My Access portal link to that access package. What happens now is you can copy that link and Adele can sign into that. I'm just showing you that in a new private window, copying that link in here. And what happens now, I come to the login page and I'm signing in with Adele. Like you see here, I can type very fast, I know. And then you will see all the available packages Adele has access to. It could be a lot. And you see here, she has now access to the marketing runners page, and she can request access. And the beauty about that solution is she submits the access, this access is audited, and it will processed, and that also means she gets access to the two groups as an owner, she gets access to the box account, and so on, and you have that fully in your scenario. The other beauty is here, consider Adele is an external vendor which works for a couple of companies. Adele can use the My Access portal to switch between organizations if she wants to. So she's currently only working with Contoso, but on the other side, you see, she can work with whomever she wants and have that in place. So this is what I wanted to show you. Also what we see here in the access packages in place to give you an overview. What we see here, we have an active assignment in place. We see how that works. And we can also go into the assignment, delete it, revoke the access for Adele, change it, and so on. And we have a lot of nice governance functionality in here. So I hope you liked the demo. I'm just going back to my presentation. I think I have 2 minutes left. If you have any questions, please just ask me, write me an email or anything else. And I will also briefly go through the Q&A if there are any. Let's just check that. If we have, yeah. Okay, hi Tomislav, nice to see you. So if there are any questions left, just let me know or write me an email. Otherwise, thank you for listening. I hope it was useful. Also hope you learned something new, and have fun at the remaining Global Azure Virtual Bootcamp today. Thank you.